Happy Monday to you. It is time for another episode of our 15 priorities where we are talking about what we need and what we need to be in St. Stephen. Now, I don't know if you've seen this, but today I want to talk about levels of government. It is absolutely crucial for your mayor and your council to either make sure that they are delivering, and we are delivering as a municipality, the services that we are mandated to deliver by the Local Governance Act and the levels of government. And if we cannot, then we need to be excellent at advocating to make sure we get those services that are mandated by other levels of government. If you have visited the Municipal District of St. Stephen website or even the office at the Garceland Civic Center, you will have seen this. It is important to know, but one thing that's important to know about this is that it not become the kind of rubric where we simply pass the buck and say somebody else needs to take care of it. Again, we have mandates that are governed by acts and laws. And so a lot of the times there is a level of, look, that is not what we are mandated to do. Maybe even legally, we cannot move into the realm of that particular service. But like I said, the way that government is set up is a group of people, right? The provincial level, the federal level, the municipal level, and we've got the service commission here as well. And so really briefly, I've made other videos on this before, but the priority is that we become a municipality where we ensure that we are getting the provincial services, that's what I want to focus on here, the provincial services that we are entitled to as members of a coalition of municipalities that are in the province of New Brunswick, okay? So really quickly here, what I want to focus on is those levels of government. In the municipal government, we are responsible for things like the water supply, solid waste collection in the urban ward, road maintenance in the urban ward, recreation like the civic center, the fire department, your representation offices, the bylaws and community events, of course, building inspections and things like that. Now, the Service Commission, again, I've made videos on this. You can search up my videos, but we share into regional public safety with them, with other municipalities. It's like we kind of collectively purchase the services of this group that are shared. And so the Service Commission helps us out with bylaws, regional recreation planning and development, economic development, whether that's tourism or funds that we have access to for granting and things like that. Tourism, I just said, public transportation, dial-a-ride funding and things like that. So when we share with other municipalities and rural service districts in the region, then of course the costs are lower for everyone and services are more feasible. But here's what's really important to know is the provincial services to make up for things, not only to make up for things like shortfalls that we've talked about in the last couple of days, for example, that $200 million province-wide infrastructure gap, things wearing out in municipalities faster than we have money to replace them. The province is mandated to help in that regard, in a lot, especially when provincial services are needed, but also with just funding our services, things that they are mandated to oversee. And so let me just share with you briefly, because when you step outside your front door, I can never unsee whether it's development, whether it's services, things that the municipality is responsible for and things that the province is for. But so it's important for you to know when you step outside your door that you understand what the municipality is responsible for overseeing and the province. So the province is responsible for the RCMP contract. I want to talk about more. I want to talk about 4 specific provincial realms today that are really crucial to sort out and for St. Stephen to get right in the next few years. RCMP contract, drinking water testing. We get so we're responsible for the water system, but the testing is provincially mandated. In fact, they are increasing their quality standards over the next couple of years, which is why municipalities are all needing to upgrade their water systems to comply with this kind of level of testing. The Justice Department, the schools, healthcare, and hospitals social services. So that's things like public housing, things like mental health and addictions, things like affordable housing, the housing continuum. We've talked about this, and so I want to focus more. That's one of the 4 things. Highways and in the rural area, that is important for us to know that the province is responsible for overseeing that. Waste collection in the urban area, property taxes and land registry. This is also provincial, right? Your property taxes, your assessments and things like that. That is why you will see this posted, because when you are needing to make a comment or even a complaint or something like that, it's important for you to know who to contact, who is supposed to help. Now, like I said, 4 really important areas that we need to focus on, your next council needs to focus on, and that St. Stephen needs to get right. I would say the first one is our housing crisis, specifically for people experiencing homelessness. So that means, on day 1, I will be reaching out to and trying to get that meeting. The ministers are coming next week with later this month, actually, with Minister Hickey, the Minister of Housing, and Minister Miles, who is the minister responsible for social development. So each of these departments, each of these mandates have a minister, somebody who is elected, and then the government set them in charge of each of those files, each of those departments. And so last month, Minister Hickey was here, Minister Miles was here. Minister Miles is responsible for social development. So I've talked about how in bridge housing, for example, we need financing from the provincial government to get those units in place. They would like to see the municipality find land, and then they will fund the capital and the operations of that. And of course, that's kind of like the buildings and the infrastructure around it. But then the services would be social development. That's where Mr. Miles would come in. And we've talked about the very stringent regulations and standards around bridge housing. It's not just another shelter where now somebody has their own space to come and go and use it as they please and live however they'd like. It is signing up as a participant into a program. We need the highest standards for that if it's going to work in St. Stephen the way it has worked in other communities like Peterborough, Ontario, Duncan, BC, Fredericton, St. John, as I've mentioned in other videos. Those are the ministers responsible for that, and I would be reaching out to them immediately, advocating with the council, maybe forming a committee on the council if necessary, to make sure that it is done absolutely right with public safety in mind. Now, speaking of public safety, we need to get that right as well, and that is Minister Gauvin, the minister responsible for public safety, but also the Minister of Justice, Minister McKee, because what we are seeing is the RCMP, and this is an issue when I was running for MLA, we want to see a level of service that is elevated and meeting the community's needs when it comes to RCMP patrolling. Again, those officers and that the constables and the staff are doing what they can under a contract, but that contract is actually up for renewal in 2032, which sounds like a long way away, but that contract is 20 years. And that's why municipalities with the Union of Municipalities of New Brunswick, but specifically municipalities like ours, who are seeing challenges around public safety, need to be at the table, need to be advocating with Ministers Gauvin and McKee to talk about what is necessary to increase public safety here in terms of the RCMP, in terms of allowing auxiliary RCMP forces, which used to be a thing, is a thing in some communities throughout Canada. It's like a secondary force with training, unarmed people in uniform, but who serve with the RCMP. And I have heard that the RCMP will not work with, just from other people who make decisions, and we're discussing this in St. Stephen, the RCMP will not work with kind of private public safety committees like the way St. John has, the community safety commission, the community safety team that they have there of officers. The RCMP doesn't work well with them. That is something that we need to see changing because the needs for policing in our community are evolving. The other thing we need is, in the rural areas specifically, to make sure that Minister Chason understands that residents need to be able to reach out to talk about paving the roads. Some of the people in our urban area, rural area in Charlotte County, really complain about roads. They don't feel like the roads are being serviced properly. That is a part of the provincial mandate. to take care of the roads in the rural area. And I talked to a councillor who even called the DTI, Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, and was told he can't call, but he's a councillor representing his constituents. And then he went out and actually tried to talk to the road crews directly and got more done talking to the crews than calling the office that is responsible for dispatching repairs. That just can't stand, especially in light of amalgamation, when that rural area was kind of pushed into St. Stephen, and now we are all together, and the municipality is responsible for advocating for that as well. And the final piece that we need to see changed is the healthcare file. So, for example, Minister Dornan, Minister responsible for health, we have a hospital here that is constantly under threat. We need to be always advocating that the hospital, which serves the entire county, if this hospital isn't at full service, then St. John is the nearest one. That is no good. I think of people, women giving birth, there's no proper natal unit here. We need to continually to develop out this hospital, especially if our population grows the way we want it to see. So advocating for the hospital, but also the healthcare clinic right here in St. Stephen. Minister Holt said it was coming early 2026. Now it's been delayed to 2027. We need to make sure that we are advocating and in communication directly always with the minister, Mr. Dornan and his team, to make sure that we do get that collaborative care clinic here. Again, I was running for MLA on this. The MLA is really an important point person for making sure that advocacy happens. And if it's not our own MLA, it can be the MLA of another riding. That is absolutely possible. Recently on CHCO, the former MLA of Fundy, the Isles, she said mayors would come to her at times. This is Andrea Anderson Mason. She said mayors would come to her and complain that they were not getting the services that they need in their wards. And good on them. That is a first step, saying, hey, we're not getting what we need. But she would tell those mayors, oh, well, there's a lineup of mayors, whether literally or figuratively, outside the offices of the ministers in Fredericton, making phone calls, showing up in person to advocate for their communities to get those services. So that's the kind of mayor that I will be, is making sure that we don't just complain about the services we're not getting. Like I say, that's a first step, that pain point. But then advocating, taking the next step, finding the right people, whether that is a minister, or in my case, if I know David Kuhn personally, I could reach out as the leader of one of the parties and just say, hey, can you advocate? And this is what I've seen. Like Megan Mitten, the Green MLA in Tantramar, she was a shining example for me of somebody who teamed with the mayors, got their healthcare clinic. I do see how this is possible. I settle for nothing less. And as someone who is responsible, the mayor, for communicating on behalf of council and advocating, it would be a sense of me sharing with you who I've contacted, where we are. That 5-step plan, right, is to understand a problem, then make a plan. And sometimes making a plan is just calling the right person and then deliberating what happens next, and then adapting and adopting that plan. That applies to in-council decisions that can be made, but then also decisions with the province and other people who are responsible for making decisions according to these mandates at these levels, right? And then building it or sharing with you along the way how it's coming along, why it's not being built, where there's a bottleneck. And that's the kind of information we just often are not privy to, but that kind of advocacy needs to happen behind the scenes. Municipalities are responsible a lot more than in decades past for things like bringing doctors, because the healthcare, if you'll recall, is in the provincial column. But in order to kind of entice nurse practitioners or doctors to come here, the municipality needs to use money from their own budget to often make that happen. Or even in terms of housing, for example, when we say, okay, you're responsible for housing, the housing continuum, but the province often says, well, you need to provide us a piece of land where we can deliver those services. So those are examples of, in our case, 4 really urgent and salient provincial services that we need to make sure we have here: the public safety, the housing, department and infrastructure, and healthcare. And I want to be the mayor who is always moving these things forward to make sure we get those services right here where we need them in St. Stephen. So we continue to build up things like our quality of life and our population and make sure we're everything we can be. All right, that is it for today. I will see you tomorrow. It is Monday. It's a beautiful Monday out there. BuildUpStStephen.ca. That is where you can continue to explore my priorities, my commitments, watch all my videos. And it's election day, 1 week from today, but you can do early voting today, so I encourage you to do that. Take care of yourself today. Take care of your neighbor. Let's build up St. Stephen together. Cheers.